The Omega was chained in the dungeon. The Alpha King found out. There are places beneath the earth where light goes to die, places carved from stone and silence, where the air itself tastes of iron and old grief. The dungeons beneath Thornhaven Castle were such a place. Corridors twisting deep into the bedrock like the roots of some poisoned tree, each cell darker and colder than the last. Most of the kingdom's wolves had forgotten these chambers even existed. The great Alpha King had forbidden the use of torture decades ago, and the dungeons had been sealed, their iron doors rusted shut, their torches left unlit, or so everyone believed. In the deepest cell, past the corridor where even rats refused to tread, a woman knelt on the frozen stone floor. Her name was Seraphine Voss, and she had once been the most beautiful Omega in the Eastern Province, a creature of golden brown hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, of wide amber eyes that caught the light like polished citrine, of a voice so gentle it could soothe a feral wolf mid-shift. She had been beautiful. Now she was something else entirely. Her wrists were shackled above her head, the iron cuffs biting into skin rubbed raw and bleeding. Her dress, once a modest thing of pale blue cotton, hung in torn strips from her thin frame. Her bare feet were blackened with filth, and her ribs pressed visibly against her skin. She had not eaten in 4 days. She had stopped counting the days before that. The chain connecting her wrists to the wall was short enough that she could neither stand fully nor lie down. She existed in a permanent crouch, a posture designed not merely to restrain but to humiliate, to reduce a living being to something less than animal. And yet, despite everything, despite the bruises mottling her arms, the dried blood crusted at the corner of her lip, the dark circles beneath her once luminous eyes, Seraphine had not broken. She had screamed in the beginning. She had begged. She had rattled the chains until her bones ached and her voice shredded to nothing. But the walls had swallowed every sound, and no one had come. So she had stopped screaming. She had turned inward, drawing on the quiet, stubborn flame that had always burned at the center of her, the thing that made her different from other Omegas, the thing that had ultimately brought her here. She could feel the moon above, even through the tons of stone separating her from the sky. It was nearly full. 2 more nights, perhaps 3. The pull of it ached in her blood like a second heartbeat. Her wolf stirred weakly inside her, too starved to shift, too wounded to howl, but still alive, still waiting. Above her, in the soaring halls of Thornhaven Castle, a very different world turned on its axis. King Caspian Vial sat at the head of the War Council table, and the 6 lords assembled before him were doing their very best not to meet his eyes. This was wise of them. Caspian was not a man whose gaze one held lightly. He stood well over 6 feet, broad across the shoulders in a way that made his fitted black tunic strain at the seams, with dark hair that he kept shorn close at the sides and longer on top, as if even his grooming were a compromise between discipline and wildness. His jaw was cut sharp enough to cast shadows, his mouth a firm line that rarely curved toward anything softer than irony. But it was his eyes that stopped people, pale gray, the color of winter storms, ringed with a darker edge that seemed to shift and deepen when his wolf pressed close to the surface. They were eyes that could pin a man to the wall from across the room. Right now they were doing exactly that to Lord Matthias Crane, who had just finished delivering a report that was, by any measure, an exercise in creative omission. "Let me understand this clearly," Caspian said, and his voice carried the low, controlled resonance of a man who did not need to raise it to be heard. "You are telling me that the grain stores in the Eastern Province are fully stocked, the Omega shelters are adequately funded, and there have been no incidents of abuse or misconduct among the Provincial Guard. Is that correct, Lord Crane?" Matthias Crane was a thin man with a thin mouth and eyes that moved too quickly. He had been appointed provincial governor of the Eastern Territories 3 years ago, not by Caspian, but by the previous Regent Council during the transition of power. He was the kind of man who survived by being useful to whoever held the leash. "That is correct, Your Majesty. The Eastern Province is thriving under current administration." Caspian studied him for a long moment. Then he picked up a document from the table, a single sheet of parchment sealed with the mark of his intelligence network, and read from it without inflection. "My sources report that 4 Omega shelters in the Eastern Province have been shuttered in the past 6 months. That grain intended for winter stores has been diverted to private accounts. That members of the Provincial Guard have been operating a system of, and I quote, involuntary bonding arrangements targeting unclaimed Omegas. He set the document down. Would you care to revise your statement, Lord Crane? The silence that followed was the kind that precedes violence. Every wolf in the room could feel it. The subtle shift in the air, the way the temperature seemed to drop, the pressure of an alpha's dominance rolling off Caspian like heat from a forge. It was not the crude, blunt force dominance that lesser alphas wielded. It was precise, surgical. The kind that slipped past your defenses and squeezed your lungs until you either submitted or suffocated. Crane's face went the color of old parchment. Your Majesty, there may have been some administrative oversights. Administrative oversights. Caspian repeated the words as if tasting something rotten. He rose from his chair, and the movement was so fluid, so controlled, that it was easy to forget the enormous physical power coiled beneath it. Lord Crane, I abolished the bonding auctions when I took the throne. I made it the cornerstone of my reign that no Omega in this kingdom would be bought, sold, traded, or forced into a bond against their will. Are you telling me that in your province, under your watch, these practices have resumed? Not auctions, Your Majesty. Merely arrangements. Negotiations between families. Negotiations. Caspian's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, and somehow that was worse than shouting. I will tell you what is going to happen, Lord Crane. You are going to return to the Eastern Province accompanied by a full detachment of the Royal Guard. Every shelter will be reopened. Every diverted grain shipment will be accounted for. Every Omega currently held in an involuntary arrangement will be freed and given the choice to dissolve any bond they did not consent to. And you will cooperate fully with the investigation into your governance, or I will personally escort you to a cell and throw away the key. Am I understood? Crane opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, perhaps to plead. Then he looked into Caspian's gray eyes and saw the wolf looking back at him, not metaphorically, but literally. The pupils elongated, the irises bleeding to silver, the air around the king shimmering with barely contained transformation. Crane dropped his gaze to the floor and bent his neck in submission. Understood, Your Majesty. Get out, all of you. The council chamber emptied with undignified haste. Caspian stood alone at the head of the table, his hands braced against the wood, breathing through the rage that pulsed in his chest. His wolf wanted out. It always wanted out when he encountered the particular brand of cruelty that men like Crane practiced, the slow, bureaucratic crushing of those who had no power to fight back. Omegas, always the Omegas who suffered most. He had been Alpha King for 5 years now, since the death of his father, King Hadion Vael, whose reign had been defined by indifference. Hadion had not been cruel in the way some kings were. He had simply not cared. The Omega bonding auctions, the territorial disputes, the slow erosion of rights for those without dominant wolf blood. Hadion had let it all happen with the negligent ease of a man watching a house burn from a comfortable distance. Caspian had inherited a kingdom riddled with rot, and he had spent every day since trying to cut it out. But the rot went deep, deeper than he had imagined. It was his beta commander, Darius Thorne, who found him still standing at the empty table 20 minutes later. Darius was one of the few people in the world who did not flinch under Caspian's gaze. They had grown up together, trained together, bled together in the border wars against the southern Pax. Darius was tall but lean, with copper-red hair and an easy, sardonic manner that concealed a mind as sharp as any blade. He was also, at this moment, wearing an expression that Caspian had learned to associate with bad news. What now? Caspian asked. We need to talk about the Eastern Province, Darius said, closing the door behind him. And not about the grain. Caspian turned to face him fully. Go on. My contacts in the underground, the Omega Resistance Network, they've been trying to get a message to us for weeks. A woman was taken, an Omega from one of the shuttered shelters, about 2 months ago. She was reportedly investigating Crane's operations on her own, gathering evidence of the involuntary bondings. She had documents, witness statements, names. Darius paused. She disappeared. No body, no trace. But there are whispers that she wasn't killed, that she's being held somewhere. Where? That's the part you're not going to like. Darius met his eyes. The whispers say she's here, Caspian. Somewhere in Thornhaven Castle. The silence that followed was different from the one in the council chamber. This was not the silence of political pressure. This was the silence of a predator going very, very still. That is not possible, Caspian said quietly. I know every room, every passage, every corridor in this castle. Do you know the old dungeons? Caspian's expression shifted. The dungeons were sealed when I was a child. My father ordered them closed after the last prisoner died there. Sealed doesn't mean empty. And your father ordered a great many things that were never actually carried out. Darius produced a folded piece of cloth from his pocket, a strip of pale blue cotton stained with something dark. This was smuggled out by a servant who delivers food to the lower kitchens. She found it caught in the grating of an old drain that connects to the dungeon levels. She brought it to one of my contacts. Caspian, it smells like Omega. Caspian took the cloth. The moment his fingers closed around it, something happened that he was not prepared for. A scent hit him, faint, buried under layers of grime and old stone and blood, but unmistakable. It was like standing in a meadow after the first rain of spring. It was like breathing sunlight. It was like every locked door inside him swinging open at once, and behind each one, something luminous and aching and entirely new. His wolf surged forward with such force that his vision fractured, the room dissolving into shades of silver and shadow. His bones cracked, his spine bowed. For a terrible, beautiful instant, he was neither man nor wolf, but something between, his teeth elongating, his nails darkening to claws, his eyes blazing pure molten silver. Caspian! Darius grabbed his arm, and the physical contact was just enough to anchor him. Caspian wrenched himself back, gasping, the transformation receding like a tide pulled back by sheer force of will. He stood trembling, the cloth still clutched in his white-knuckled fist, and when he looked at Darius, his eyes were not entirely human. "Mate," he breathed, and the word came out fractured, half growl, half prayer. "That scent. Darius, that is my mate." Darius stared at him. In all the years he had known Caspian Vale, through wars, through grief, through the crushing weight of a crown neither of them had asked for, he had never seen the man look like this, shattered, terrified, blazing with a fury so absolute it seemed to bend the air around him. "Then we go now," Darius said simply. They went. Caspian moved through the castle like a storm given form. He did not walk. He stalked, each stride devouring the distance, his wolf riding so close to the surface that servants pressed themselves against the walls as he passed, their own wolves whimpering in instinctive submission. The scent on the cloth was a thread, and he followed it with the single-minded intensity of a creature that has finally found the one thing in the world it cannot live without. Down. Past the great hall, past the kitchens, past the servants' quarters and the storage cellars and the wine vaults, down stone steps that grew rougher and older, the walls closing in, the torches guttering and failing, down to a heavy iron door that should have been sealed but bore the fresh scrape marks of regular opening, its lock oiled and gleaming in the darkness. Caspian ripped the door from its hinges with his bare hands. The metal screamed. The sound echoed down the passage beyond like a declaration of war. The smell hit him first, rot and damp and suffering, but beneath it, threading through it like gold wire through mud, that scent, his mate's scent, and now it was mixed with blood and fear and the acrid chemical signature of prolonged starvation, and each of those layers peeled another shred of civilization from the Alpha King and left something older and more dangerous in its place. He was shifting as he moved, not fully, not yet, but the lines between man and wolf were dissolving. His shoulders broadened, his senses sharpened to blinding clarity. He could hear heartbeats now, one faint and thready, deep in the passage ahead. Several others, faster, panicked, somewhere to the left. Guards. There were guards down here. The first one came around the corner with a sword drawn and met Caspian's fist with his face. The impact lifted the man off his feet and drove him into the stone wall hard enough to leave cracks in the mortar. The second guard tried to run. Darius caught him, slammed him to the ground, and had a blade at his throat before the man could draw a full breath. "How many?" Caspian snarled at the fallen guard. His voice was barely recognizable, a deep grinding resonance that vibrated in the chest like approaching thunder. The guard, his nose shattered and streaming blood, pointed deeper into the passage with a shaking hand. One prisoner. End of the corridor. Please, Your Majesty. I was only following whose orders?" The guard's eyes went wide with something beyond ordinary fear. "Lady Isabel, Your Majesty's aunt. She arranged everything. The cell, the guards, Caspian did not wait to hear the rest. He was already moving, and this time there was nothing human about the way he moved. The transformation took him mid-stride, bones reshaping, muscle and sinew reknitting, his human form dissolving into something massive and black and terrible. The wolf that emerged was enormous even by Alpha standards, standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, its fur the deep, lightless black of a moonless sky, its eyes twin pools of molten silver. He, filled the corridor like a living shadow, and the sound that tore from his throat was not a growl, but a roar, the primal, earth-shaking fury of an alpha who has found his mate in chains. The last door was iron and oak, reinforced with bands of cold-forged steel. It had been built to hold feral wolves. It lasted approximately 2 seconds. Caspian hit the door at full speed, and it exploded inward in a shower of splinters and twisted metal. The cell beyond was small and dark and unspeakably cold, and in the center of it, chained to the far wall, was the most beautiful, most broken thing he had ever seen, Seraphine. She flinched at the explosion of sound and light, her chained arms jerking reflexively, her body curling into the smallest possible target. She could not see clearly. Her eyes had adjusted to near total darkness, and the torchlight pouring through the destroyed doorway was blinding. But she could feel. Every Omega could feel an Alpha's presence, and what was pouring into this cell was Alpha energy of a magnitude she had never imagined possible. It crashed over her like a tidal wave, overwhelming, annihilating, and somewhere deep in the starved, battered ruins of her wolf, something stirred, something recognized. The massive black wolf filled the doorway, and for a moment he simply stood there, his silver eyes locked on the small, broken figure chained against the wall. Then he shifted. It was not the gradual, controlled transformation of the council chamber. It was instantaneous. One heartbeat wolf, the next heartbeat man, standing barefoot on the cold stone, his chest heaving, his gray eyes incandescent with a rage so vast it seemed to have its own gravitational pull. Caspian crossed the cell in 2 strides and dropped to his knees before her. His hands that had just torn through iron and oak, reached for the chains with a gentleness so absolute it was almost reverent. He did not touch her. Not yet. He was afraid that if he touched her, he would either shatter or detonate, and neither would help her now. "Look at me," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "Please, look at me." Seraphine raised her head. It took effort. Her neck had been bowed so long that the muscles screamed in protest. Her vision swam, cleared, and she found herself looking into the face of the Alpha King of the Western Realm. She knew him. Everyone knew him. His face was on every coin, every decree, every wanted poster that the Resistance had ever studied. But the posters did not capture this. The rawness, the devastation, the way his gray eyes burned as they catalogued every bruise, every wound, every evidence of suffering on her body. "Who did this to you?" His voice was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. The kind of quiet that precedes the end of something. She tried to speak. What came out was a rasp, a cracked whisper of a voice that had spent weeks screaming into silence. Your aunt, Lady Isabel Vale." Something in Caspian's face went very still. Then he reached up and closed his hands around the chains binding her wrists. The iron was thick, cold-forged, designed to resist wolf strength. He tightened his grip, the muscles in his forearms standing out like cables, and with a single savage motion, tore the chains from the wall. Stone fragments showered down around them. The shackles remained on her wrists, but the chains hung free, and for the first time in weeks, Seraphine's arms fell. The pain was indescribable. Blood rushed into tissue that had been compressed and starved for so long that the return of circulation felt like liquid fire. She cried out, a thin, broken sound, and Caspian caught her before she could collapse. He gathered her against his chest with the careful, measured tenderness of a man holding something infinitely precious and infinitely fragile. And the moment her body made contact with his, the bond ignited. It was not subtle. It was not the gentle warming that the old stories described, the slow recognition of one soul calling to another. It was a detonation, a supernova of sensation and emotion and raw, primal knowing that ripped through both of them simultaneously. Caspian felt it like a fist closing around his heart, not painfully but absolutely, as if every scattered piece of himself that had been drifting for 31 years suddenly snapped into place. He could feel her, not just her body in his arms, but her exhaustion, her pain, her fear, and beneath all of it, burning steady and defiant as a candle in a hurricane, her courage. Seraphine felt it too, and she did something she had promised herself she would not do again. she wept. Not the silent, contained tears of someone accustomed to suffering in silence, but deep, racking sobs that shook her entire body, because the bond was warmth and it was safety, and it was the first gentle thing she had felt in so long that the contrast nearly destroyed her. Caspian held her and said nothing. He pressed his face against her filthy, matted hair and breathed her in, and his wolf, that vast, furious creature that had torn through doors and guards to reach her, went completely, utterly still. Found, mine, protect. The words were not human. They were older than language, carved into the deepest architecture of what it meant to be Alpha, and they settled into his bones like a vow. Darius appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and silently stationed himself outside with his back turned, his hand on his sword, guarding the entrance to the corridor. Whatever was happening in that cell was private and sacred, and he had known Caspian long enough to understand the magnitude of what the king had just found. It was several minutes before Caspian spoke again. When he did, his voice was steady, though the effort it cost him was visible in the tension of his jaw. I am going to remove these shackles. Then I am going to carry you out of here. Then I am going to burn this place to the foundation. Can you tell me your name? Seraphine, she whispered against his chest. Seraphine Voss. The name meant nothing to him yet. Later it would mean everything. Seraphine, I am Caspian, and I swear to you on my blood, on my wolf, on every breath left in my body, no one will ever chain you again. He broke the shackles with his bare hands, the metal groaning and finally snapping under force that should not have been possible outside a full shift. The iron fell away, and the skin beneath was a horror. Deep, weeping abrasions ringed each wrist, the flesh swollen and discolored, infection already setting in. Caspian's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached, but his hands remained gentle as he lifted her, cradling her against him like a child. She weighed almost nothing. The thought made his vision blur with fury. He carried her up through the passages, past the destroyed door, past the guards Darius had bound and gagged, up the winding stone stairs and into the light of the castle above. Servants stopped and stared. Wolves paused mid-conversation, their eyes going wide, their nostrils flaring as they caught the tangled scent of Alpha and Omega and bond and blood. A murmur spread through the corridors like wildfire, and by the time Caspian reached the royal quarters, half the castle knew that the Alpha King had found his mate in his own dungeon. The royal physician, Dr. Linnea Marsh, was already waiting. Darius had sent word ahead. She was a stout, silver-haired beta woman with steady hands and a manner that brooked no nonsense. And when she saw the state of the Omega in the king's arms, her composure cracked for exactly 1 second before professional discipline reasserted itself. Put her on the bed, gently. Warm water, clean cloths, and the blue case from my quarters. Now, she ordered a nearby servant, then turned to Caspian. Your Majesty, I need to examine her. I need you to. I am not leaving. I was going to say, I need you to sit down before you break something. She looked pointedly at his hands, which were trembling with barely contained fury, his claws half extended, leaving gouges in the wooden bed frame. You can stay, but you will sit, and you will breathe, and you will let me work. Your wolf terrifying my patient will not help her heal. Caspian sat. He breathed. He watched as Dr. Marsh worked with careful, efficient precision, cleaning the wounds, treating the infected skin, administering fluids and nutrients to a body that had been systematically starved. Through it all, Seraphine drifted in and out of consciousness, her hand reaching blindly for his whenever the pain spiked, and every time it did, he took it and held it, and felt the bond pulse between them like a shared heartbeat. It was during one of her lucid moments, several hours later, that the first piece of the truth came out. Seraphine's eyes focused on him, really focused, for the first time, without the fog of pain and delirium. She studied his face with an intensity that made something in his chest constrict. You really didn't know, she said softly. You didn't know I was down there. No, the word tasted like ash. If I had known. Your aunt told me you ordered it. She said the king had approved my imprisonment personally, that I had been charged with treason against the crown for interfering with provincial governance. A ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. I didn't believe her. The Alpha King who abolished the bonding auctions would not chain an Omega in a dungeon for trying to protect other Omegas. But I had no way to prove it, no way to send word. Tell me everything. And she did. Seraphine Voss had been born in the Eastern Province, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a healer, both betas. Being born Omega to Beta parents was rare but not unheard of, and in the Eastern Province under Crane's governance, it was a particularly dangerous thing to be. The Omega shelters, safe houses established under Caspian's reforms, had been her lifeline growing up. When she came of age, she had dedicated herself to working within them, first as a counselor, then as an administrator. She had watched Crane systematically dismantle the protections Caspian had put in place, replacing shelter staff with loyalists, redirecting funds, and quietly reinstating the involuntary bonding arrangements under the euphemistic label of negotiated partnerships. She had started documenting everything: names, dates, financial records, testimony from Omegas who had been forced into bonds. She had built a case that, if presented to the king, would have been enough to bring down not just Crane, but everyone complicit in the operation. But she had made the mistake of trusting the wrong person, a Beta woman named Petra Vane, who worked as a liaison between the provincial government and the crown. Seraphine had given Petra copies of the documents, believing she would deliver them to the king's intelligence network. Petra had delivered them to Lady Isabel Vielle instead. Lady Isabel, Caspian's father's sister, a woman who had been a fixture of the court for as long as anyone could remember, elegant, sharp-tongued, politically astute, and seemingly devoted to the crown. She had been one of the regents during the transition of power after Hadion's death, and she had stepped aside gracefully when Caspian took the throne, retiring to a role as informal advisor and social coordinator. She was respected. She was trusted. Caspian was now beginning to understand, something else entirely. She came to the shelter personally, Seraphine said, her voice gaining strength as the nutrients and fluids did their work. With 6 guards, she told me I had been accused of forging documents to destabilize the kingdom. She said the evidence I had gathered was fabricated, that I was part of a conspiracy to undermine the crown's authority in the provinces. I tried to argue. I had the original documents, the testimonies, but she took everything, all of it, and then she brought me here. 2 months ago, Caspian said. 2 months, 1 week, and 4 days. Her amber eyes held his. I counted every sunrise by the temperature changes in the stone. I felt every full moon through the walls. She paused. Your aunt visited me 3 times. The first time she told me that if I renounced my claims and signed a confession, I would be released. The second time, she offered me a bonding arrangement with one of Crane's allies, a man named Harkon Slade, in exchange for my silence. The third time, she swallowed. The third time, she told me that no one was coming, that the king did not care about one missing Omega from the provinces, that I would die in that cell, and my body would be dissolved in lye, and no one would ever know. The room temperature dropped, literally. Dr. Marsh, who had been quietly taking notes in the corner, looked up sharply as frost crystallized on the window pane. Caspian sat perfectly still, but the air around him had gone dense and cold, charged with the kind of energy that preceded a thunderstorm. His eyes were no longer gray. They were solid silver, edge to edge, the pupils swallowed entirely, and when he spoke, the words came from somewhere deeper than his chest. Darius. The Beta commander appeared in the doorway instantly, as if he had been waiting for exactly this summons. Your Majesty, find my aunt, find Petra Vane, find Harkon Slade, find every guard who served rotation in those dungeons. Arrest them, all of them, now. Darius nodded once and vanished. Caspian turned back to Seraphine. The frost on the windows was spreading, delicate patterns of ice crawling across the glass like living things, and his hands, resting on his knees, bore claws instead of fingernails. You said she took the documents, the evidence you had gathered. Yes, everything. Then we will find them, and if she has destroyed them, we will rebuild the case from scratch. Every testimony, every record, every name. I will personally go to the Eastern Province if I have to. But I need you to understand something, Seraphine. He leaned forward, and the intensity in his silver eyes was almost unbearable. What you did, what you tried to do, that was not treason. That was the bravest thing I have heard of anyone doing in this kingdom since I took the crown. You risked everything to protect people who had no one else to protect them, and you were punished for it by someone I trusted, someone in my own family. His voice broke on the last word, and for just a moment, the fury receded and something rawer showed through. Guilt. Devastating, corrosive guilt. This had happened under his roof, in his castle, to his mate, and he had not known. Seraphine watched the emotions move across his face, the rage and the guilt, and the aching tenderness that surfaced whenever he looked at her, and she understood something fundamental about the man before her. Caspian Vale was not angry because his authority had been undermined. He was angry because someone had been hurt, because she had been hurt, and the distinction between those two things was the entire difference between a king and a tyrant. She reached out and laid her bandaged hand over his clawed one. The touch sent a ripple through the bond, warmth spreading through cold, calm through chaos, steady golden light through roiling silver storm. His claws retracted. The frost stopped spreading. His eyes faded from silver back to gray, though the storm in them did not entirely abate. "You didn't know," she said simply. "You couldn't have known. I should have. A king who cannot see what happens in his own house is still a man, and men are not omniscient." Her thumb traced a gentle arc across his knuckles. "Your aunt counted on that. She counted on the impossibility of you knowing everything, and she built her operation in the one place you would never think to look. That is not your failure. That is her cruelty." He stared at her, this woman who had been chained in darkness for 2 months, who had been starved and beaten and lied to, who had every reason to blame him, to hate him, to reject the bond that fate had strung between them like a lifeline. And she was comforting him. The absurdity of it, the generosity of it, hit him with the force of a physical blow. "You are remarkable," he said hoarsely. "I am tired," she corrected, but the faintest ghost of a smile touched her lips. "And I would very much like to never see the inside of a dungeon again." "Done. That is the easiest promise I will ever make." He lifted her hand, carefully, so carefully, and pressed his lips to the bandaged knuckles. The bond sang between them, a low, resonant hum that settled into the marrow of their bones. The arrests were swift. Lady Isabel Vale was found in her chambers, packing a trunk with the efficient calm of someone who had prepared for this contingency. She did not resist when Darius and 4 members of the royal guard arrived at her door. She looked at them, looked at the warrants in Darius's hand, and smiled, a thin, cold curve of the lips that held no warmth whatsoever. "I assume he found the Omega," she said. "He found his mate," Darius corrected, and watched with grim satisfaction as Isabel's composure cracked for the first time. Just a flicker, a widening of the eyes, a tightening of the jaw. But it was enough. She had not known. She had imprisoned the king's fated mate without knowing what the Omega was to him, and the realization of what that meant, for her plans, for her future, landed on her like a falling wall. "That is unfortunate," she said quietly, and allowed herself to be led away. Petra Vane was arrested at the border, attempting to cross into the southern territories with a case full of documents. The very documents Seraphine had compiled, along with a ledger of payments from Crane's accounts and correspondence with 3 other provincial governors who had been running similar operations. She broke within hours of interrogation, spilling everything in a frantic bid for leniency. The picture that emerged was staggering in its scope and its audacity. Lady Isabel had not simply been protecting Crane. She had been running the entire operation, a vast clandestine network of involuntary bonding arrangements spanning 4 provinces, funneling wealth and political power to a coalition of nobles who opposed Caspian's reforms. The bonding arrangements were not merely cruel, they were strategic. By forcing Omegas into bonds with allied Alphas, Isabel's faction was building a parallel power structure, creating bloodline alliances that would eventually give them enough combined dominance to challenge the throne itself. It was, in essence, a slow-motion coup. And Seraphine's evidence, the documents she had gathered at such terrible personal cost, was the thread that, when pulled, unraveled the entire tapestry. The trials began within the week, and they were public, because Caspian understood that this was not merely a matter of justice, but of trust. The kingdom needed to see that no one, not a provincial governor, not a noble, not the king's own blood, was above the law. The Great Hall of Thornhaven was converted into a tribunal, and the proceedings were attended by representatives from every province. Lady Isabel Vale stood before her nephew and the assembled lords and showed no remorse. If anything, she seemed contemptuous of the proceedings, of the witnesses, of the very concept that what she had done constituted a crime. "You are dismantling this kingdom," she told Caspian from the defendant's stand, her voice carrying the aristocratic precision of someone who had never doubted her own superiority. "Your reforms have weakened the natural order. Alphas lead. Omegas serve. That is the way it has been for 1,000 years, and your sentimental idealism will not change the nature of wolves. The nature of wolves, Caspian repeated, standing behind the tribunal table in his formal blacks. The crown of Thornhaven, a circlet of dark iron and silver, resting on his brow, is not what you think it is. The nature of wolves is to protect the pack, all of the pack, not to prey upon the most vulnerable members of it. He looked at his aunt, and there was something almost sad in his gray eyes. Not pity, but the particular grief of discovering that someone you loved is someone you never really knew. You imprisoned an innocent woman. You starved her. You chained her in the dark, not because she was a threat to the kingdom, but because she was a threat to your power. That is not the nature of wolves. That is the nature of cowards. Isabel's composure finally broke, not into tears or remorse, but into fury. She was an Omega, a common provincially bred Omega with no bloodline, no standing, no, she is my mate. The words fell into the hall like stones into still water. Caspian had not intended to make the announcement here, in this context, but his aunt's contempt had pushed something past the point of containment. The murmur that swept through the assembly was a living thing. Shock, disbelief, awe. The Alpha King's fated mate, found in the dungeons, chained by his own aunt. Isabel went white. That is impossible. The Voss line is common. There is no precedent for a royal mating with, there is precedent now. The silence that followed was absolute. Caspian continued, his voice steady and carrying to every corner of the great hall. Seraphine Voss risked her life to expose the corruption in the eastern province. She gathered evidence that has led to the dismantling of an illegal operation spanning 4 provinces. She endured imprisonment, starvation, and abuse rather than sign a false confession or submit to an involuntary bond. And she did this not for power, not for status, but because she believed that the reforms I put in place were worth defending, that the Omegas of this kingdom deserved protection. He paused. If that is not worthy of standing beside a king, I do not know what is. The trial concluded with sentences that sent shockwaves through the aristocracy. Lady Isabel was stripped of her title, her lands, and her place in the Vale lineage, and sentenced to life imprisonment in the very dungeons she had used to imprison Seraphine, though Caspian, on Seraphine's quiet request, ensured the conditions were humane. Crane was removed from office and sentenced to 20 years. Petra Vane, in exchange for her testimony, received a reduced sentence of 5 years. Harkon Slade, who had intended to claim Seraphine through forced bonding, was sentenced to 15 years and permanent exclusion from any position of authority. 17 other nobles and officials were arrested, tried, and sentenced in the weeks that followed. The involuntary bonding network was dismantled province by province. Every Omega held in a forced arrangement was identified, freed, and offered full support, housing, counseling, legal assistance to dissolve bonds they had not chosen. The Omega shelters in the eastern province were reopened, refunded, and expanded. And at the center of it all, recovering slowly but steadily in the royal quarters of Thornhaven Castle, was Seraphine. Her body healed faster than anyone expected. Dr. Marsh attributed it partly to Omega resilience and partly to the bond, the constant sustaining presence of her Alpha's proximity, which seemed to accelerate every process of repair. Within a week, the infections had cleared and the wounds were closing. Within 2 weeks, she could walk unassisted. Within 3, she was restless, pacing the chambers, reading everything she could find about the ongoing investigations, asking questions that demonstrated a mind as sharp and incisive as any of Caspian's advisors. Their bond deepened in these quiet weeks, not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through the small, accumulating intimacies of shared space. Caspian brought her books from the castle library and discovered she had read more widely than most of his scholars. She asked him about governance and listened, really listened, with the focused intensity of someone building a framework for understanding the world. He told her about his father's failures, about the weight of a crown, about the loneliness of being the most powerful person in a room, and therefore the most isolated. She told him about the shelters, about the Omegas she had known, about the everyday courage of people who had nothing but still found ways to protect each other. They argued too, which surprised them both. Seraphine did not defer to him, not out of disrespect, but because she had spent her entire life thinking for herself and was not about to stop now. When she disagreed with a policy decision, she said so, clearly and with evidence. When she thought he was being too cautious in his reforms, she pushed. When she thought he was being too harsh in his sentencing, she pushed back the other way. It was, for Caspian, both infuriating and intoxicating. He had spent 5 years surrounded by people who either feared him or flattered him, and here was a woman who did neither, who looked at him not as a king but as a man, and who demanded of that man that he be better. "You are impossible," he told her one evening, after she had spent 20 minutes systematically dismantling his proposed timeline for provincial reform and presenting an alternative that was, he had to admit, considerably more effective. "You are stubborn," she replied, tucking a strand of golden brown hair behind her ear. Her amber eyes were bright with the particular light they got when she was engaged in something that mattered to her. The bruises had faded. The hollows beneath her cheekbones were filling. She was beautiful in a way that went far beyond the physical, a beauty of intelligence and resilience and fierce, unbreakable spirit. "I am the king, and I am right. These are not mutually exclusive, but tonight they happen to be in conflict." He stared at her. Then he laughed, a real, full laugh, the kind that crinkled the corners of his gray eyes and transformed his face from severe to something startlingly young and warm. It was, Seraphine realized, the first time she had heard him laugh. The sound did something complicated to her heart. "If I agree to your timeline," he said, still smiling, "will you stop looking at me like I am a particularly slow student?" "That depends on how quickly you agree." He shook his head, still smiling, and pulled her closer. She went willingly, settling against his chest with the ease of someone who had found the exact place in the world where she fit. The bond hummed between them, steady, warm, alive, and in its resonance was everything that words could not yet carry. Not yet, but soon. The formal bonding ceremony was held on the first day of spring, and it was unlike any royal bonding the kingdom had ever seen. There were no auctions, no negotiations, no exchange of territories or political concessions. There was only Caspian and Seraphine standing in the castle's great courtyard beneath a sky so blue it seemed polished, surrounded by every wolf who could make the journey, nobles and commoners, alphas and betas and omegas, representatives from every province. And in the front row, watched over by Dr. Marsh, were the omegas from the eastern province shelters, the ones Seraphine had fought to protect, wearing their best clothes and weeping openly. Caspian wore his formal blacks and the iron and silver crown, but he had refused the ceremonial armor that tradition demanded. "I am bonding with my mate," he had told the horrified master of ceremonies. "Not going to war." Seraphine wore a dress of deep gold, the color of autumn fields, the color of her eyes, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders, covering the fading scars on her wrists that she had chosen not to hide. The ceremony itself was simple. They stood facing each other, hands clasped, and spoke the ancient words, not the formal, legalistic bonding vows that had been standard for centuries, but the older ones, the ones from before the bonding auctions, from a time when the bond between Alpha and Omega was understood to be sacred rather than transactional. "I see you," Caspian said, and his voice carried the quiet, unshakable conviction of a man who meant every syllable. "Not your designation, not your bloodline, not your utility to my crown. You, the woman who walked into darkness to bring light to others, the woman who would not break. I see you, and I choose you, and I will spend every day of my life being worthy of that choice." "I see you," Seraphine replied, and her voice was steady even as tears tracked silently down her cheeks. "Not the crown, not the power, not the wolf that tears through doors. You, the man who knelt in a dungeon and broke my chains with his bare hands, the man who listens, the man who aches for every injustice he cannot immediately fix. I see you and I choose you, and I will spend every day of my life reminding you that you are more than your throne." When the bond sealed, when his teeth grazed the mark on her neck and her wolf rose to meet his in a surge of golden light that everyone present could feel, the courtyard erupted, not with polite applause but with howls. Hundreds of wolves, shifting and unshifting, raising their voices to the spring sky in the ancient celebration, the sound echoing off the castle walls and carrying across the valley like a promise. Caspian, still holding his mate, still feeling the bond blazing between them like a second sun, shifted his gaze to the crowd and found Darius standing at the edge, arms crossed, wearing the closest thing to a genuine smile that his sardonic face could manage. Their eyes met, and Darius inclined his head, a gesture that contained years of friendship, of loyalty, of shared purpose. Then Caspian looked at Seraphine, and she looked at him, and for a moment the crowd and the castle and the kingdom fell away, and there was only this: 2 wolves, 2 hearts, 1 bond, and the fierce, impossible, unbreakable truth that some things, once found, cannot be taken away. But the kingdom's wounds did not heal as simply as its new queen's wrists. In the months that followed the bonding, Seraphine stepped into her role as queen consort with a determination that caught even Caspian off guard. She had not been raised for court. She had no training in diplomacy, no experience with the elaborate social machinery of noble houses, no bloodline credentials to smooth her path. What she had was something more dangerous: intimate, ground-level knowledge of exactly how the kingdom's systems failed its most vulnerable members, and an absolute unwillingness to be silent about it. She began with the shelters, working with Dr. Marsh and a small team of administrators she handpicked from the provinces, Omega women, every one of them, who had lived the realities she was trying to change. Seraphine redesigned the entire Omega protection system from the ground up. The shelters were expanded from temporary refuges into comprehensive centers offering education, vocational training, legal advocacy, and medical care. She established a network of Omega liaisons in every province, reporting directly to the crown rather than to provincial governors, creating a parallel accountability structure that could not be easily corrupted or co-opted. The nobility was not pleased. Some accepted the changes with grudging pragmatism. The trials had been public, the evidence damning, and opposing the king's mate so soon after the scandal would be politically suicidal. But others seethed. The reforms threatened not just their economic interests but their fundamental worldview, the ancient, deeply held belief that the wolf hierarchy was natural, immutable, and ordained by something greater than any king's decree. The resistance crystallized around an unexpected figure: Lord Fenwick Hale, an alpha of the northern province, who had not been implicated in Isabel's network, but who shared her philosophy in all but method. Hale was clever, far cleverer than Crane or Isabel had been, and he understood that direct opposition to Caspian was futile. Instead, he mounted a campaign of elegant, plausibly deniable obstruction. Provincial councils stalled implementation of reforms. Funding requests were mired in bureaucratic procedure. Legal challenges were filed on technicalities, and in the dark corners of noble houses, a whisper began to circulate. The king was besotted, bewitched, led astray by a common Omega who had seduced her way from a dungeon cell to the throne. The whisper reached Seraphine, as it was designed to. She heard it first from a servant who mentioned it with lowered eyes and apologetic tone, and then from a visiting noble's wife who delivered it as gossip over tea, watching Seraphine's face for cracks. Seraphine absorbed it with the same quiet resilience that had sustained her in the dungeon, but the words found their marks. In the dark hours of the night, when Caspian was called away to deal with yet another crisis, and she was alone in the vast royal chambers, the old doubts crept in. Was she enough? Did she belong here? Had she earned this position? Or had fate, and a mate bond she had not asked for, simply dropped her into a role she was not equipped to fill? Caspian found her one night sitting in the window seat of their chambers, staring out at the moonlit courtyard where their bonding ceremony had been held. Her knees were drawn up to her chest, her arms wrapped around them, and even in the silver light he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself as if bracing for impact. "Tell me," he said, settling beside her. "They say I bewitched you." Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, which worried him more than tears would have. "That I used the bond to manipulate you. That an Omega of no bloodline has no place beside the king. They said similar things about me when I abolished the auctions. That I was weak, sentimental, unfit to lead." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you believe them?" "No." The answer was immediate. "But I wonder sometimes if they're right about one thing, that I don't belong here. Not because I'm not worthy, but because I'm more useful elsewhere. I know how the shelters work from the inside, Caspian. I know the provinces. I know the people. And here," she gestured at the ornate chambers, "here I am arguing with lords about funding allocations and attending ceremonies and learning which fork to use at formal dinners. And I feel like I'm playing a part in someone else's story." He considered this with the seriousness it deserved, which was one of the things she loved most about him. He never dismissed her feelings, never minimized, never offered platitudes. "You're not wrong that you would be effective in the provinces, but you're wrong about not belonging here. You belong here because you bring something this court has never had, the perspective of the people it is supposed to serve. Every lord who sits across the table from you and has to answer your questions about shelter funding and Omega education is confronting something they have spent their entire lives avoiding: the reality that their power comes at someone else's cost. He paused. You terrify them, Seraphine. That is not a sign that you don't belong. It is a sign that you are exactly where you need to be. She turned to look at him, and the moonlight caught her amber eyes, turning them to molten gold. When did you become wise? Approximately 3 months ago, when a woman who had been chained in my own dungeon started telling me how to run my kingdom. She almost smiled. Almost. Caspian. Yes, I don't want to just be the queen who was rescued from the dungeon. I want to be the queen who makes sure no one else ever ends up there. Then be that. He took her hand, and the bond flowed between them. Not the dramatic incandescent surge of their first contact, but something deeper and steadier. A river, not a lightning strike. And I will be the king who stands beside you while you do it. It was 3 weeks later that the plot was uncovered. Darius brought the intelligence directly to Caspian, bypassing the usual channels, because the nature of what he had found demanded absolute secrecy. A servant loyal to the crown had intercepted a letter, sealed, encoded, and addressed to a contact in the Southern Territories. The cipher was good, but the crown's codebreakers were better, and when the message was decoded, it contained plans for something far more serious than political obstruction. Lord Fenwick Hale was organizing an assassination, not of Caspian. Hale was not foolish enough to believe that killing the king would serve his purposes. The Alpha Lords would simply choose another king, and the martyrdom would only strengthen the reform movement. No, the target was Seraphine. Kill the Omega Queen, the letter argued, and you remove the driving force behind the reforms. The king would be consumed by grief, the reforms would stall, and in the resulting vacuum, the traditional order could be quietly reasserted. The letter also contained a detail that chilled Caspian to his marrow. The assassination was to be carried out during the upcoming Harvest Council, a gathering of all provincial leaders at Thornhaven. The weapon would not be a blade or an arrow, but something subtler, a rare plant extract called Nightbloom Essence, which was lethal to wolves in small doses and virtually undetectable once administered. It would be introduced into the queen's food, and by the time the symptoms appeared, it would be too late. Caspian's first instinct was to descend on Hale's estate with the full force of the royal guard and tear the man apart with his bare hands. Darius, who knew his king well enough to anticipate this, had brought Seraphine to the meeting. If you arrest him now, on the basis of an intercepted letter, his allies will claim persecution, Seraphine said, and her voice had the particular cool clarity it took on when she was thinking strategically. The letter is coded. They'll argue it was mistranslated. Hale will play the victim, and the traditionalist faction will rally around him. We need more. More than a documented plan to murder my mate. Caspian's voice was dangerously level. More than circumstantial evidence, yes. We need to catch him in the act. The plan they developed was Seraphine's, and it was brilliant in its simplicity. The Harvest Council would proceed as scheduled. The queen would attend every feast, every meeting, every public event. But the food she consumed would be prepared by Dr. Marsh's team under sealed conditions, and the dishes served to her at the public table would be covertly replaced before reaching her. Meanwhile, Darius's intelligence network would track every person connected to Hale, mapping the conspiracy in real time. The Harvest Council arrived on a day of sharp autumn wind and golden light. Representatives from all 9 provinces gathered at Thornhaven, and the castle filled with the controlled chaos of political assembly, alliances being negotiated, grievances being aired, and, in the shadowed margins, something darker being set in motion. Seraphine played her part with a composure that astonished even Caspian. She sat at the high table, ate from the replaced dishes, smiled at lords whose loyalty she could not trust, and conducted herself with the serene confidence of a woman who had survived worse than treachery. And all the while, Darius's people watched and waited. The move came on the 3rd night. A kitchen servant, planted by Hale's people, was observed introducing a small vial of clear liquid into the queen's wine goblet. The servant was allowed to complete the act, watched by 3 hidden witnesses, and then quietly intercepted before the goblet reached the table. The vial was secured, the servant detained, and within 2 hours, the entire chain of conspiracy was rolled up. The servant, the intermediary who had recruited him, the noble who had provided the Nightbloom essence, and Lord Fenwick Hale himself, who was arrested in his quarters while composing a letter to his allies announcing the imminent success of the operation. This time, there was no trial. Not because Caspian dispensed with justice, but because the evidence was so overwhelming and so public, presented before the full Harvest Council, with witnesses, confessions, and the physical evidence of the poison, that Hale's own allies abandoned him. The traditionalist faction, seeing the depth of their exposure, fractured. Some surrendered, some fled, some quietly began revising their political positions with the sudden, fervent enthusiasm of converts. Hale was sentenced to death, the first execution Caspian had ordered in his reign, and one he did not make lightly. He stood in the great hall afterward, alone, staring at the empty tribunal chair, and Seraphine found him there. "You did what was necessary," she said. "I know." His voice was hollow. "That does not make it easier. It shouldn't." She stood beside him, not touching, simply present. "The day it becomes easy is the day you should stop being king." He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted from the isolated heaviness of a man who had just ordered a death to something warmer, something almost like wonder. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say the exact thing I need to hear, every time, without fail." "I pay attention." She reached out and straightened the collar of his tunic, a small domestic gesture that in its ordinariness was more intimate than any grand declaration. "That's all. I pay attention to you, Caspian. Someone should." He caught her hand and held it against his chest, where his heart beat steady and strong beneath her palm. The bond pulsed between them, and in its current was everything. The darkness they had walked through, the battles they had fought, the quiet, stubborn hope that had carried them from a dungeon cell to this moment, standing together in the hall where justice had been done and the future was still being written. Spring came again to Thornhaven, and with it, something new. Seraphine stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly, watching the dawn light spill across the valley like liquid gold. Behind her, Caspian lay sleeping, sprawled across the bed with the unself-conscious abandon that only deep trust allowed. One arm thrown across the space where she had been, his dark hair disheveled, his features softened by sleep into something almost boyish. She smiled. It was a private smile, meant for no one, containing everything. Below, the castle was waking. She could hear the clatter of the kitchens, the murmur of the guard change, the distant sound of hooves on cobblestone as the morning couriers departed. In the eastern province, 3 new Omega centers were opening this week. She had the reports on her desk. In the northern province, the first Omega-led council was being sworn in, a pilot program she had designed and fought for through 6 months of bureaucratic warfare. Across the kingdom, the laws were changing, the systems were shifting, and it was slow and imperfect and frustrating and real. The baby moved beneath her hand, a flutter, a kick, a small declaration of existence, and Seraphine's breath caught, not with pain, with the sheer, staggering improbability of her life. A year ago, she had been chained in the dark, starving, certain she would die unnamed and unremembered. Now she stood in the morning light, carrying the heir to the kingdom, bonded to a man who saw her not as a designation or a political asset, but as a partner, as an equal, as the person he wanted beside him when the world was difficult and the answers were unclear. Caspian stirred behind her, and she felt him wake through the bond, a slow brightening, like a lamp being turned up. A moment later, his arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on the top of her head, his body warm and solid against her back. "You're thinking too loud," he murmured. "I can feel you strategizing from across the room." "I'm thinking about the Northern Councils." "You're always thinking about the Northern Councils." His hand settled over hers on her belly. "How is our future troublemaker this morning?" "Active and hungry, like their mother." She elbowed him gently, and he laughed. That real full laugh she had learned to draw out of him, the one that crinkled his gray eyes and made him look like someone other than a king. And in the golden light of the new day, with the kingdom stretching out before them, and the future kicking insistently beneath their joined hands, they stood together, the Omega, who had been chained in the dungeon, and the Alpha King, who had torn through iron and stone to find her. And they breathed, and they hoped, and they began again, because that is the nature of wolves, not dominance, not hierarchy, not the cold calculus of power. The nature of wolves is this: when one of the pack falls, the others do not walk on. They turn back. They howl until the fallen one hears them. They bare their teeth at the darkness, not because they are not afraid, but because fear is not permission to abandon the ones who need you most. And in the kingdom of Thornhaven, Under a king who tore through doors and a queen who tore through systems, the wolves were finally learning to turn back.